Teaching with AI, not to AI, Practical Strategies for Improving Teaching and Learning, presented by Dr. Abdul Alawini, Teaching Associate Professor at the Siebel School of Computing and Data Science. Dr. Alawini's research interests are broadly in databases, applied machine learning, and education. He is particularly interested in applying machine learning methods to improve classroom experience and education in general. He is also interested in building next-generation data management systems, including data provenance, citation, and scientific management system. And for his efforts as a fantastic teacher, he is the 2024 recipient of the Campus Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching. This session will answer the following question: how do we harness generative AI to elevate, not replace, teaching and learning? This talk surveys current evidence-informed uses of AI in classrooms and then gets hands-on with faculty-ready workflows. We'll look at classroom assistants and virtual tutors, AI-supported assessment and feedback, and ways to weave AI literacy into the curriculum. Concrete demos include drafting new lectures, mapping a literature review to course modules, building quick simulations and visuals for lectures, and auditing assessment quality, complete with guardrails for verification, privacy, and ethics. Attendees will leave with practical prompts, templates, and adoption checklists they can use in their next course offering. If you have any questions throughout this event, if you're physically in the room, please raise your arm. If you are on Zoom, do not hesitate to place your questions in the online chat. The host will collect them and notify the presenter. A thumbs up on your message or question will be used to confirm your question was received by the host. Thank you for attending. I hope you enjoy this event. And without any further ado, Dr. Alawini.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited. I think you've provided a great introduction. I don't have to say more. Except for the fact that when I received the undergraduate award for the campus level, I had my students call me Your Excellence in undergraduate. So my main training was in database systems. Database systems has nothing to do with AI initially, right? We're people who manage data, make sure that we're applying the things that we've learned for scientists, for business, for all sorts of domains. But even early in my PhD, I figured out that I can't run away from machine learning. That's the word. If you say AI back then, it's not as as attractive as it is right now. So back then, the focus was more in machine learning because that's what was practical. That's what was working. So we used it in trying to, reason about data, figure out how scientific data could be used better, could be structured better. And that's what I've been doing throughout my career. When I joined U of I joined as a teaching faculty back in 2018. And I had one of the kind of elective courses, but it's well attended. So I needed to kind of innovate day one. Like everything was on paper, all the exams, and this is more of like a programming course. I needed to have interactions and figure out what students are doing in real time. So I started to use, the skills that I've gained throughout my PhD and postdoc experience to kind of build systems, and that's what I do for education. So I'll talk later more about some of the systems I've kind of built, but I wanted to make sure that you guys get out of here with some hands-on techniques. I do want to have to emphasize that this presentation is focused for teachers and instructors, not for students. I would not be able to say the things that I'm saying here if I was demoing this to students, because there are a few things that you need to be extra careful when you are actually asking students to interact with and work with AI. So maybe the second half, this says like teach with AI, not to AI, because if you leave everything, you're actually allowing students to basically use AI for everything, and you're not actually making sense of what you're doing. So that's why I said utilize AI and think about it. So the second half of this talk would be kind of student focused, but I'll touch base on some of the things. So I'll talk about how we could use Gen AI and specifically agentic AI tools to prepare lectures, to develop new curriculum. The most exciting thing that I should encourage every instructor nowadays is to at least use Gen AI to develop visual aids and real-time tools that you can demo in class. You could literally make most of your slides, most of your complex slides, lecture notes interactive with the use of Gen AI, and you don't have to be a software engineer, right? And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing here in Illinois, and that, of course, time dependent. So even if we don't have much time, I'll probably run over a few things just to give you a heads up if folks are interested in joining force or talking about a few things. So what I'm going to be doing moving forward, I'll show you a scenario of a use case, and then I'll switch to the tool that I use to kind of perform the use case. I want it to be as practical as possible. And I'll tell you the reasoning behind how I do things, how I think about prompting, how I ensure that the tools that I'm interacting with producing the results that I'm expecting. Because if you're not actually checking the quality of these tools, you're in trouble, right? I'm not sure if you guys heard about the story of a student who actually sued college because they thought the faculty didn't do much work to get stuff done. We don't want to be in that type of situation, right? So, in the School of Computing, Siebel School of Computing and Data Science, we need to kind of always innovate when it comes to the data field. We need to kind of introduce new courses all the time. So one of the courses that I've been teaching called Data Management in the Cloud, which is basically how we manage data beyond just a simple server. If I have my data stored in the cloud, how do I manage data? I'm not going to teach you that course, but I'm going to say that it's one of the most hot fields. It's like as hot as Gen AI right now. Like there's always new technologies, there's always new systems involved, there's always new paradigms. And for me as an instructor, every time I offer this course, and I usually offer it every spring, I have to kind of keep myself up to date with what's going on. So for this particular scenario, I used a tool called Manus, and it's an agentic AI tool that is one of the first actually agentic AI tools that kind of really has a special take into it, and that's why I enjoy using it. And I'm not here to market for that company, but I'll talk about the transparency in terms of how it allows you to actually intervene with the results and interact with the agent. So I asked it to provide me with a couple of lectures related to two topics. One is called data lake architecture, like way to kind of store data, and another paradigm called serverless data processing. So I was direct. I asked for the number of lectures. I mentioned that I do want to have some discussions, so I need to have some kind of discussion questions involved. I was very direct in terms of the resources that the tool should use. So I listed some of the top tier venues and database systems like very large database, special interest group and management of data, SegMod, particular type of textbooks, because I also know what sort of platforms that are actually using that I need to use, I also provided that. Okay, so let me switch and show you what Manus can do. It's gonna take a little bit of time, so I'm gonna show you in action how it works. And then I'm gonna actually show you the results just to save time. So here is the prompt that I provided. And I'll let you in a secret here. And it's a very important secret about prompting, because every tool is built with a different kind of mechanisms, and we don't have time to sit and read the manuals of every single tool and figure out how we do better prompting. We can have a general idea of how to prompt, but there is a key way of prompting that everyone should use. You can stick to a particular model, like say OpenAI, ChatGPT 5 thinking, or whatever you want, and then make that your prompt engineer. In a sense, before you actually come to any tool, sit in front of ChatGPT and interact with it, say, hey, I need to do this task for this particular tool. Give the tool the context so that it kind of provides you with the most possible useful prompt that you can provide. So that's my secret, and this prompt was actually enhanced by ChatGPT. It gives the context of the course that I teach, where is course placed in the curriculum. It gives some information about the two topics that I'd like to cover with some information about these topics, again, here and here. And then very, very important, right, that you have to put some guardrails there. You have to make sure that it's citing resources. You have to be able to even, I would say that this prompt is a bit weak on that side. I'll show you another prompt that does a better job. You have to be able to actually check citations from material that produced. And there are techniques for doing that. Now, here's the fun thing. Once I hit enter and I start basically getting some information from Manus, it's just going to tell me what is it actually it's going to be doing. And in a minute, it's just going to give me a way to see what the agent is doing in real time. So what's happening in the background, there's a virtual machine being created somewhere with the plan of execution. The plan of execution is going to be shown here. And then once it's ready, you can actually go there and see it in real time. If you're a developer, you can go through the machine through Visual Code Studio. Or if you're a regular user, you can actually get into the pipeline by actually seeing what Manus is doing at this point. So probably it's doing nothing at this point. But let me show you when it actually starts to create some data. I've actually closed that window accidentally. It's still working. That's the nice thing. You can go and come back at any moment. It's still working. And then I can see the window of the agent and what the agent is doing in real time. I can see the plan, I can verify, and now look at it actually viewing some papers. And I'll take this moment and I'll jump into the browser and actually try to add maybe more papers if I want. So here is the paper that it's looking at. I can add a new tab and I can look up for any particular paper that I would like to access, and then say, use this paper. I'm so happy about my website. I show it all the time, right? It does have some links to some papers, but it's still working in the background. So I can interrupt it and say, hey, use this paper also. So I am in the pipeline, okay? What's nice and ethically needs to be, we need to think about that. Sometimes these agents get blocked and they ask for your help. So, hey, they need a human interaction. So you have to make your own decision whether you want to intervene or say, yeah, maybe I don't want to touch this data. But as you can see, I am actually seeing it in real time. I will be seeing it highlighting sections of the text. I will see it extracting and working on the information that I'm interested in. Okay? So for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you what actually Manus would produce. It's going to show you all the intermediate results that's been used. And it's going to give you actually a wonderfully looking kind of designed slides that I definitely would not recommend that you use off of the hook. You'd have to review them. You have to put your own touch. You'd have to change things. You don't have to trust those slides, but it's a good, really good start. It goes through a lot of things. And I've reviewed the output of this, and I've used a version of this in one of my courses. So you need to kind of go over this, maybe refine a few things, add a few comments, make sure that it's actually using some actual citation. So far, so good. This is use case number one. Got slides ready to go. Yes?
In those set of slides that you showed us, they
Yes.
look great. Do you know whether there is a way to ask for digital accessibility to be actually embedded within
That's actually a use case that I do mention in the other use cases that I haven't covered.
All right.
You know, it's good for basically automatic generation of alternative formats for students with disabilities. It is extremely important. One of the best tools that you can use for these purposes is making your format of whatever resources you provide to your students accessible to all students, the diverse set of students. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions so far? Use case two.
We do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Alexandra asked, thank you for the demo. Could you please show once again how you get to the pipeline?
Okay.
As far as what it's doing in the background.
Yeah, so that's right here. I'll show it at the beginning. You would see that that's my prompt initially, and here is where the system is working. So you would see it's going to tell you about the task that it's working on, and it's still actually working on the task. I open up that taskbar. I can click on the browser, and that will take me to where the agent is actually working. And we're talking about a single agent scenario. There would be scenarios when we're going to be able to actually spin off multiple agents to do a lot of good stuff at the same time. Yes?
Is the agent working off of a version of your computer? Is it working on another remote computer? Or?
It's working on the cloud. It's working on their computer because it will be accessing some resources that requires, high power computational hardware and stuff that we may not own.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know what, the thing that I'd like about Manus, the fact is that you can intervene within the process. It's not like most of the tools that we know right now. Send a prompt, wait for the result, try to tweak it back and forth and improve it. Using agentic, transparent, I call it transparent agentic AI, allows you to kind of get into the pipeline and add kind of guardrails, give suggestions and stuff like that. Any other questions? No questions.
I guess a quick question. You are
Yes.
able to edit those slides easily that?
Yes, so you can get them out in any format,
In any
PPT, you can actually connect Google Drive and it could ship them to you as Google Slides if you want. And this is something, that's what's going to be changing a lot this coming years, app integration. So most of them are working into having those agents get into your Expedia accounts, get into, hopefully not your bank accounts, all your accounts, and get stuff done for you without having you kind of intervene. You definitely need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
So use case 2, from time to time, we get new degrees coming out. So we need to add new courses. The first step for every instructor before you add a new course is to actually kind of explore the field, trying to figure out what's out there. So in this scenario, I asked Gemini to, not Gemini actually, I asked still Manus, I'm still working with Manus here, to kind of help me build a course focused on some main topics like data processing, systems for machine learning, modern large-scale systems analytics. And I would provide it with information again, like venues, time frame for the type of papers that I'm looking for, the main pillars for the course, which is the kind of the abstract learning objectives that I'm aiming for, the goals that I have for the course. And then again, guardrailing is very important. I need to have the full citation. I need to have 2 to 3 sentences. That's very important. Kind of not just throw me something, give me information about where this data is coming from. And it's not just that, because one thing I do all the time, even with this ability to access as a human, if I have someone who could do the job for me, I'm not going to intervene with the agent every time and see what they're doing. It's really hard to kind of follow, because the idea with those agents is that they want to free you up so that you do something more important, right? So rather than having to watch and intervene, basically include in your prompt some of the guardrails, some of which is to ask for the citation and get quotation in forms of 2 to 3 sentences. And what I actually do, if it's something of like high stake, very important, I would actually take some phrases from these sentences, go to the actual papers and search them up and read context, trying to make sure that this is not something that is made up, that the paper actually says what the Gen AI says it says. Now, I don't always trust Gen AI, but something I'd have to say as a computer scientist, that Gen AI built over long-standing NLP techniques. So when it comes to dealing with like text summarization and things like that, those tools are really great, right? One thing I use generative AI from the early days. I teach a class of 500 students, and I do actually want to hear like all ISIS comments. So one things I do is like I paste all the comments there, and it does summarize them in a wonderful way, and it gives me pointers to like important things that I need to focus, things that I need to change. But in terms of text summarization, these tools are great. You still don't need to kind of verify. And that's what I emphasize here. So when you're doing curriculum design, you can ask for like, topic heat map, gives you an idea about the main pillars of your course and shows you some of the venues that covers and some of the topics involved. You can ask it to actually outline some modules for the course that you're trying to create. You can have an annotated reading list. You can look for trends and gaps. And I kind of talked about guardrailing when I was talking about the other part. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to run this. I'm just going to show you the results. And you can see here, I like Manus is kind of honest. It tells you that it authorizes that, right? So it tells you where are the resources. These are some of the top database conferences out there that are very reliable, very famous across the world. And it goes over introduction, methodology for collecting data, and it kind of summarizes all the information that you're looking for in a way. So this is an earlier version. Actually, this version does not include the citation and the quotation that I asked for. So I had to kind of prompt it again to be able to get the information that I'm looking for. But it does, to some extent, kind of reference some information from the paper. And at the end, it has to list all basically the references that are used, okay? So here, I've noticed that several Gen AI tools tend to want it to actually focus on a small set of papers. In fact, this is something adjustable. You could actually specifically ask for how many papers you're looking for, or at least a range of papers that you're looking for, because the agent is going to try to make it easy for themselves. So then you can actually increase the bandwidth if you want. A third similar example or a third use case is for research. As a faculty, we do research, and it's really important that we don't step on anybody else's toes and that we're building on other people's work. And it's extremely important for doing something similar. So I'm not going to spend much time on this scenario. I'm just going to show you the output, and it's very similar to the one before, but it has more guardrails. So you would probably see somewhere the kind of annotations clearly mentions there, the quotation from the source papers are listed, and that is going to help me kind of take a look at this resource, scroll down to where the reference is listed, click the reference and verify that the paper actually exists. And then here you go, I have the paper, and I'm going to actually go back and select the information that was listed there and copy just to make sure that that text is extracted from there and it's within the context where the text is actually mentioned. Not sure if the search is going to work.
Show you in the document?
So this is the actual document that so I want to basically find that text in the document that it referenced to make sure that it is actually grabbing that text from there and it's sensible. And it's not just reading that text that I'm looking for. It's reading the context within where it got that information, because I want to make sure that its context is important. Something that most of generative AI tools struggle with is the context. So setting up a wrong context, maybe sending a wrong prompt, could cause it to act differently. This is a case we would notice if we'd have a long thread. When you're interacting with any sort of Gen AI tool, if your prompt gets longer and you keep trying to modify and tweak your requests, it kind of loses track of how things are going. So far, so good. I want to pause for questions. Yes?
With the body of work that it's sort of interrogating, do you have any way other than just prompting to sort of know how it's filtering those out, like how it's selecting which journals? Does it have access to JSTOR? This is like a bunch of questions.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's actually a very good technical question, because from I haven't spent much time looking at remember when I showed you Manus, I showed you that you can look at the pipeline through a web browser and you can look it through a programming platform.
Code, right, yeah.
The VS Code gives me access to the VM. So I actually get the root access of the VM and I'll be able to see what files are running there and what's happening. I haven't digged that deep, but it just kind of uses the resources you provided. And then even if you don't go to the kind of console mode or the web view mode, you're still seeing it list some of the paper that it selected. Now, how the criteria was used is kind of amplified, kind of explicitly got from what you requested, but the selection process is something to figure out, like why it select those paper other than, other type of papers.
This is another place where you as faculty are going to have the final say. You can go through and say this paper is garbage, even if the AI got it right. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other thing you can do initially also is to be basically direct with the prompt. You want to say, I want highly cited papers. I want papers from this type of scientist or this group of, or this SLAP. So you kind of be direct while you're prompting that. It's not just the venue that you want to control. You could also control, maybe ask for papers that win the Time Award or something. So you want to kind of be specific in terms of how you prompt the tool to look for papers.
Is this Manus also?
Yes. Yeah. But what I'm saying here, for the most part, is now available in most other platforms, because OpenAI just released their agentic AI tool, and it's no different, except for the part where you can actually stop the agent and get involved in it. So what I'm saying here, by the way, there's another very important thing that I'd like to emphasize. As a computer scientist, I do not use WebView to interact with these tools. I can actually plug in through APIs. I am talking about things you can do as a user through web interface, right? Because through other mechanism of connection, you can do a lot more. But even with the standard web view kind of access, you still have the power to do a lot of the things that I'm showing here. Did you have a question?
Yes,
Yes.
sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, not at all.
With this, this is my first time hearing about Manus, and I really do like the idea of being able to interrupt it.
Mhm.
How did you come across it? How did you like find this tool?
So they come across me for some reason. I've been very active over the past few years, running some workshops since the incentive of Gen AI. And they were very systematic in sending emails to people. And I thought it's a fraud at the beginning. But then I've heard from my colleagues that there's this company coming out, they were talking about it. So I signed up. In a sense, they send you an invitation, you accept the invitation. So I was with them in their early versions. Early versions was a bit problematic. They can go in like infinite blue. They never give a response, but they upgraded their infrastructure quite significantly. I do want to emphasize that I have zero connections with them. I do believe that it's a Chinese company that I need to emphasize. And from a technology perspective, everything we need to think about in terms of like questions you've asked before, where this data actually lives. That's something that we always think about. You see, most of the tasks that I'm using, I don't care about anyone actually, figuring out that I'm developing a curriculum for another course. In fact, if they want, I can give them the whole curriculum once I have it ready. Make sense? Okay, so after the, this talks about, how to systematically talk to the Gen AI, why this helps, kind of very obvious, this task saves us a lot of time. Course development is something that sometimes we tasked with in the last minute, and having a tool that can help you out, build the infrastructure for your course is very, very important. Being able to trace, and track how the AI works is extremely important. And skills to updates, right? I told you these topics are ever changing, and having, you can actually manage in other systems, you can schedule tasks. So I can say every 2 months, run this, let review and tell me what's happening. Has anything changed? And that's something significant and important. Now, off to the thing that me as an instructor spend a lot of time trying to build demos back in the days, because I'm not a graphic designer. I don't have like, fancy CSS, HTML, JavaScript ability to be able to kind of visualize the things that I do. So what is my tool? PowerPoint, right? Kind of automate things over PowerPoint. That's most people what we do. I figured out that you can do a better job, and I'm going to show you quite a few examples using different tools for trying to automate things. This is just a use case that I've used in a faculty workshop for the civil and environmental engineering 3 weeks ago by now. And I just asked him, like, what sort of scenario you'd like to use and that you can actually build a demo in no time. And they give me this example, which I built in a tool called Cursor AI. Now, Cursor AI kind of freaks you out because it's developed as an integrated development environment for software engineers. But look at this side, okay? Forget about this side for now. I would have to kind of admit that Cursor AI is built for developers, but it's kind of also a tool that is used to allow you to build and test things locally. So if you're a developer, maybe you'd think about deployment and things like that. Here, you could actually ask it through prompting, pretty much like ChatGPT, to build something that you're looking for. And as you can see here in the prompt, I ask it to help me with creating, I'm not sure if you can see this. I do apologize if it's too small, but it's just kind of build a demo. You're a course assistant. I want this interactive simulation, style simulation that illustrates basic traffic engineering concept, right? A traffic light, an intersection, and some parameters in the traffic light that we can look at, right? Nothing fancy. So let's look at what's happening here. In no time, without any extra prompting, just the prompt that I show you that was engineered by ChatGPT with some information about the domain, it was able to produce me with nice, actually I have to reset because it's still working since last time I demoed this. So it's gonna take time, and it's gonna tell you the timer for the red light, and there is a red light here. And then cars will start to arrive at a particular pace. You can change the cycle length, you can change the arrival rate, you can make cars arrive faster if you wanna basically see a different version. We can also decide the green time ratio and stuff like that. This is built in literally no time, and the instructor can use this while they're teaching the class to showcase what are the concepts. There are a few bugs there, the cards kind of stack on top of each other. and some of them disappear completely. Don't worry about that. These are things you can fix. These are things you can fix. And then once we have a green light, the cars start moving, and you can visualize a lot of other types of demos, even with some kind of basic visualization here. They're not to be erased, by the way. You can see like all cars are getting out at the same time. Okay, here is now that's Cursor AI. If you don't want to use Cursor AI, stay away from Cursor AI. Let's just think about something that you can use. Gemini also has built a suite of tools that are really, really powerful. I'm showing you here Google AI Studio. It kind of combines everything that you need to work with. You can chat with the kind of prompted as you use any Gen AI through the prompting. You could do streaming, you could do media generation, all in one place, okay? They give you a bunch of scenarios, like apps that are built. And the one thing I'm gonna think about is kind of consider here is the build functionality. So the build functionality can literally allow you to build an app, right, in no time, and in fact, even help you deploy it. I play soccer, and folks who play soccer know that people who play soccer tends to be always excited. And we had always a huge problem. Everyone wants to win, right? And then team formation has been a problem, right? They always complain about, oh, this team has better players, that team has better players. Literally, they were fighting, and then I was like, I'm gonna go home. In 5 minutes, I built an app and I deployed an app that creates team formation in no time, no question asked, right? Gets the player position and the player ranking. I never tell them about the ranking because I get to rank them myself, and then I put that in the system, and that kind of creates two teams problem solved, and actually use Google AI Studio to build the app and deploy it in Google Cloud Platform in no time, and I give access to people. So let me show you an example that I've generated with basically Google AI Studio. So this is just a visualization that is kind of talk about supported beam analysis. It's for a particular domain. It does that, not just show you the visualization, it's actually able to show you some formulas, and it can, I said that I teach a class to two different kind of population, so it kind of provided explanation at different levels. So you see the importance of this, that if you don't like this or you want to add some more features, you could say animate this, right? And or add some features that we can make it animated so that we change these visualization. All right, so this is a second example. A third example that I have to admit that me and a colleague of mine from the civil engineering, we were in a completely different meeting talking about something related to Granger College. And she sat next to me and she said, Abdu, I would like to task my students to build an app using Gen AI. And I was like, tell me what the app is. And while she was telling me about the app, I wrote a couple of sentences about the app in Gen AI. And she said, are you taking note? I said, I'll show you. And then she wanted to do social vulnerability hazard analysis. And she told me about, like, there are some scenarios that I'd like to embed. I did not take any kind of detailed comments. I literally took a couple of sentences out of what she said because I was in a meeting and I wanted to be respectful to what's happening in the meeting. And this what was provided to me. I mentioned that I need a social vulnerability hazard analysis in the Urbana-Champaign area, kind of covering all factors. I did not mention the factors by any means. And I said, I also need a scenario-based hazard analysis. These are the two sentences I provided. So if I did not spend time prompt engineering this or thinking about it, this is an interactive map that I can actually look at different types of vulnerability kind of metrics, and like household composition and disability, minority status and language. And it's going to show you over the map, and it can actually even verify where the resources of the data is coming from. The other neat thing about this, that I was able to look at some other kind of factors like in hazard-based scenarios. And when I click analyze, what the tool is actually going to do, it's actually going to prompt an AI. So it connects to a Gen AI tool, collects information and present it to a students in a very kind of nice, simple to read way. So this app not only kind of use a map API overlaid the map with information, collected the information to be overlaid to begin with. It actually allowed me to be able to, and for some reason, yeah, full screen is what I'm looking for. And so sorry for if it wasn't that visible. So for this, for the hazard-based scenario, you can see that it provided me with information about information related to this particular scenario in the Champaign area, right? So, and it's all AI generated in real time. Okay, so this idea of you need a software engineer or you need to reach out to engineering IT or to the CS department or to figure out that you need to build this particular demo is no longer a thing. Now I have to emphasize something that I emphasized at the beginning of this talk and re-emphasize again. This is for faculty's conception, right? If you choose to task a student to do something like this, you'd have to actually run several experiments. You have to have you and your staff make sure that it's actually going to produce something that would engage students into like a problem-solving skills. And it's not just something that they can create and go on. So you'd have to think about how you prompt them to actually enhance the design to begin with, or what sort of design elements that could be changed, and in what way that the problem could be formatted so that it touches on the topics that that students need to learn. It's funny enough that a group of faculty in the Granger College had a strategic instruction innovation program grant to try to introduce computing to their particular engineering field. I was like, do we actually need to do that anymore? Like, we have to think about how do we integrate, like people think about you know, software engineering and whatnot as a way to kind of build simulations and whatnot. But what if AI can actually automate this stuff? Can engineers focus on more engineering things? I'm not saying that learning, we still in CS teach coding. Like that's completely different paradigms. It kind of switches the way you think about problems, and it's an important thing to teach for for kind of problem solving skills. But if your goal is to teach it just so that you reach to a particular goal, maybe using Gen AI tools for that purpose is extremely important. Okay, so final example or final use case that I'm gonna go over today is reviewing questions. I use PrairieLearn. Raise your hand if you heard about PrairieLearn. Okay, and it's a wonderful tool in terms of allowing us to not only auto-grade, but it's also auto-generate questions. I've spent you know, a lot of effort trying to automate the infrastructure, and I am really kind of, you know, harvesting that type of work because there's a lot of things that I could automate. And now think about Gen AI and what Gen AI could do in terms of allowing us to create variants, to basically be able to test the quality of the questions that we are building. One important thing that I struggle with, for me, every time I have a new homework assignment, it's pretty much like Apple releasing a new iPhone. Or Samsung releasing a new device, waiting for something to happen, right? Maybe the battery is going to heat up or something is going to go crazy. So, by the way, I'm a Samsung user, so I'm not picking on something in particular. So I would want to say that it's important that you run the assignments that you've developed through AI for two reasons. One, you kind of connect, like in this scenario that I'm going to show you, I actually connected the assignments to the learning objectives, and I provided AI with the lecture notes and the material that students are exposed to. And I asked AI to tell me whether this question tests the learning objectives that I'm focused on and at what level if I want to go deeper. And then it allowed me to understand also AI's ability in terms of solving this problem. If I have time, I'm actually going to talk about another, you know, Granger College funded project that looks into how AI basically could do in several engineering courses. So for us as a faculty, I think the least we can do is to figure out the impact of AI in all sorts of assessments that we are developing. Can it do better job? How is it impacting students' learning? Is it not doing well? Do I need to emphasize to my students that AI could be misleading in certain topic, certain part of assignments? Because believe it or not, even if it's against the student code or the course policies, the students are still using it. In fact, I remember having my daughter come to class once, helping me, and I do collaborative learning in class. Even if 500 or not, I enjoy having students work together, and students should not use AI for collaborative learning. I don't emphasize it so hard. And my daughter came to me after class. She said, I saw a few people using ChatGPT. I was like, you should have told me. Okay, so let me showcase this example real quick. So I said, review it. Here is the course objectives. And I give it the description of the problem and what AI is going to do. It's going to give me a quick review, emphasize some of the problems that could be in the question, give me suggestions for improving some of the ambiguous wording. And it's also going to try to solve it. So it's going to explain how it's solving it, what is its logic about solving this problem, what potential things that could, mislead students. And then, of course, AI is very helpful, right? It's going to give you, hey, here is a better version of the assignments if you would like to adapt this. Okay, so there are so many more use case scenarios that you can use it for. And I just picked a few, and I hope as I was just demonstrating some of the use cases, you thought about some that you could use in your classroom. And I would love, definitely, I do this because I want to learn myself. So I would love to hear from you if you think about other scenarios where, Gen AI could be helpful. I do have to say it for the third time, I am giving this information to faculty who are domain experts. I would be extremely using a different language, be extremely careful when I'm demoing this to students and asking students to use it because they're not domain experts. So that's something very important. So I'll pause here for a sec because we have time and see if you folks or folks online have any questions. Yes?
I have a quick question on that point about domain expertise. You mentioned you getting campus awards for education. On that same level of thinking, what's your advice to someone newer in education? They maybe don't have those types of awards and they're hearing these tools. Is there anything to curb the, just the appetite to be like, I want to save time, so I start using the tools? Do you think it will undercut any teaching skills and any ways to spot things? Because you're sculpting more than you're building.
That's true. That's 100% true. It's something that it's not just the new instructor's job to do. It's a unit also, in a sense, because when you're having new faculty coming in, I believe I was part of the recruiting committee since I joined here, and we recruit specialized faculty. And we believe that recruiting is part, but then supporting them as they start is extremely important. So if I put a new instructor in a situation where they have to kind of figure things out, and if we talk about the new track faculty and other type of faculty where they have other things that may weigh in more in their career than teaching, I would not be surprised that folks would be using these techniques to cut corners and, because that's what's built for, right? They're gonna focus their attentions to things that weighs more in their promotion package. And that's a reality, right? We kind of, human by nature, like we are reward-based kind of human beings. Like we look for things that optimize the rewards. And so what I would say, that's why I kind of shifted that the unit has a lot to do, because I need to make sure that I'm giving new instructors courses that are well developed and have them actually, if you have the capacity to have them co-teach, that's wonderful. If not, then you have to at least give them a well-developed class and ask them to kind of grow with that course or set of courses if the person is responsible for teaching more than one course. In CS, our teaching assignment is 400 students per semester, so that usually amounts to a course. But in other departments, of course, it's kind of different. And the other thing is having workshops that emphasizes the importance of the basic knowledge that we have to gain. So when I came to teaching, I did not learn what I've learned so far if it wasn't for the environment I was in. The Collins Scholars Program, all these workshops, the computing and education research group in the CS department, the education school and their efforts, all that kind of helped me realize, oh my God, there is this, Bloomington pyramid, this and that. And I've never thought about it. I was a student my entire career, and there are things that you've never heard before. So it's the environment that you are in that would help the instructor be a better instructor, to kind of emphasize the importance of the basic of how you be a better teacher. The science of learning and all that is extremely important to be conveyed to new instructors. Yeah.
Tiffany and Alexandra are singing you praises, but there is one question. Hey, the AI services that you talked about, are they usually paid services?
So it depends. The business model for most of these tools is like, let me give you a few credits, but you're gonna run out of them in like a couple of tasks. They're usually in the range between $20 to $40. I personally pay over $300 a month using all these different tools, and it's, to this day, I haven't reached out to the department because there's a bunch of complications in terms of getting permissions to actually access some of these tools. So it lies on you to kind of make sure that you're using them in a way that's useful. So that's why it's also important to decide which tool that you want to use, because some of them are redundant to each other. So if I'm into like building small tasks and whatnot, Gemini AI tool is $20 a month, and it's reasonable. I would probably use it for most of the tasks I mentioned. If you're really into like agentic AI and doing wide search and deep search, then Manus could be a tool that you could use. And I think their subscription is around $40 a month or something around this. So unfortunately, we're not yet, there is always expenses behind running those machines. And there is also an environmental impact running through these machines. A lot of water consumptions that the data centers has to go through, not just the regular cooling. It's just like if you have AI and if you're running AI hardware, you're actually doing maybe double, if not triple, the amount of cooling that you need for those machines. So there are a lot of ethical aspects that we have to think about when we're using these new technologies.
So Abdu, building on your answer,
Mhm.
you mentioned departmental complications.
Mhm.
As a faculty, have you tried to acquire solutions, a subscriptions, and you face some difficulties? Can you talk about what type of difficulties you're facing?
So every college has its own system. I think the Granger College, I would say we're a bit lucky in a sense that we have the National Center for Supercomputing. And that by definition has clusters that run some of this, hardware that would support AI. I'm not sure if you folks heard about Illinois Chat. It's a project that I'm involved in that also run a bunch of open source models within our service. So that's easier way to access. The CS department in particular is building infrastructure locally to try to support research, because you can just do research relying on external, because there are all sorts of complications in terms of data access and privacy and sensitivity. So now you can reach out to campus and or your unit and ask. But the complications are on the procedure. When I said that, meaning that they will ask you a bunch of questions to be able to actually use the funding for that purpose. And most of these questions will stop you immediately from using those resources. Anything that involves data that is not in public websites, they will immediately say, we're not going to be able to move forward.
Is it an issue of data protection?
Exactly. Yeah, because these systems, people who build the systems haven't been very clear in terms of how the data is being reused. And there has been a lot of experiments where people who interact with ChatGPT or even Gemini, you come after a while and you ask questions about yourself, you'd be surprised about how much information it's been collecting about you. In fact, if you notice that most of the prompts I say, it would sometimes even call me Professor Alawini or something. It's just like, it's direct in terms of like, the tool knows who I am. And you can always try interacting with the tool and ask it, can you write me a bio? And I would just kind of emphasize not just only the research or academic work, it's just going to talk about your habits. So if you ask it about a diet, or if you ask it about it, like a exercise routine, it's just going to mention all that you've exchanged with. So that kind of, we're still not obvious in terms of how these tools use our data, and we definitely need to be careful. Hopefully that answers your question. I do have 10 minutes, so I'm not going to go in full detail about some of these projects, but I want to kind of emphasize some of the work that we do here. So I'll talk about AI and how, if you want to go beyond just using these tools in terms of like using these tools to actually transform education, depending on what you're doing in the classroom. This precedes Gen AI. This is using traditional machine learning techniques and some of the NLP. I teach database systems, and one of the things I do, I teach database programming. So students will be writing what we call structured query language, SQL queries against a particular database to get data from the database. The way I teach my class, I do a very short lecture or a worked example in the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then students will spend the remaining hour working in groups of 3 or 4 students, solving problems like this. one thing with SQL and a lot of the other programming language we teach is there's so many ways to arrive at the same solution, and some of which are optimal, some of which are not so much. So for me to be able to actually give good feedback to my students in real time, I have, even if I'm using PrairieLand, I have to sift through like actually 10,000 submissions at a time, because I have unlimited number of submissions, and students, you have 3 to 4 people in each team. Everyone can submit as many as they want until they get the correct answer. So for me to be able to sit in class, demo something where I can understand what students are doing, we run machine learning to grab this data and cluster the data based on structural similarity of how they wrote their queries, so kind of linguistic features and whatnot. And then what that will allow me to be able to see the different types of solutions students are employing, the correct one and the incorrect one tagged. And I will be able to kind of click one of the clusters right here, and then that will show me sample solution, and I'll talk to students, hey, by the way, this is a bit more complex solutions. You could have done it easier. Even if it runs, and even if it's correct, there is a better way for solving this problem.
So
yes.
how do you find out how do you get the data from what the students have asked?
So students are working on online assessment tool.
Online,
They're
and then you're
working
able
on
to
PrairieLand, right? And
cluster from that.
yeah, and I was one of the people who actually integrated collaborative learning in PrairieLand, which is a great tool, right? You can create a group in PrairieLand, students can submit asynchronously, and they can see each other's submissions. And that's a wealth of data for us to not just study how they learn, what sort of problems they get through, and also how they collaborate. So the other project that I would like to emphasize, I think some of you have heard about Illinois Chat, and it's actually a great tool, and I have to emphasize it's really powerful tool for so many reasons. The data is here, right? The other thing is there's so many open source models that you can choose from. You can put it on the guided learning mode where you can emphasize. I cannot guarantee that it's always going to be the case because there are so many different models used, but at least you kind of emphasize to the tool that you should basically get answers from. And I think I do have it here. So one very important thing is that you can cluster groups of like information that you have about your course, and then you can upload your course material and put them into those clusters, those groups. Then you can also decide the type of LLMs that you could use. You could even get the commercial ones if you have an API key, but you can get all those sort of NCA hosted LLMs, and the students can even choose from them when they're prompting. So if I'm a student and I go back to the chat and I want to ask a question, I can actually choose the temperature, and which is a very important factor that is described here. And I can also choose the LLM that I would like to use to get me the answer. So students can play with and see the different responses. One thing that I like about it, that it has the guided learning and use only information provided by the documents that are uploaded to the model. And then you can basically use a prompt to kind of make it follow a particular aspect. I'm showing you this here because we're running an experiment as we speak, where I'm giving this to my students, and there are like 5 or 6 courses involved where we're trying to emphasize entrepreneurial mindset thinking. So we're adding this info box at the end of each prompt to kind of emphasize an aspect of the EM mindset. So this is kind of an experiment that we're running, and this is something that you can do, and you can collect a lot of information. Something I haven't mentioned here is the dashboard that shows you the analysis part, that shows you like how many times, how many conversations, there's some other statistics that could be useful. There is a feature that I have not enabled here, which is a topic cluster. It's actually show you a graph with the most queried topics, which is extremely important. So we use that tool to kind of run an experiment in just trying to figure out what sort of questions students are asking when they're using the tool. These are the set of courses involved. Just want to keep an eye on the time. And you've noticed that all of them engineering except for the last one, it's from the agriculture and consumer economics, I guess, department. It's a liberal arts college. You see the number of users, the number of conversations, and the level of the course. And these are, when we analyze the data, of course, anonymize it, we got an IRB approval and all that. You can notice that the students actually use it in a good way for most courses, the parallel programming, the data systems, And the other two engineering courses, most of the questions were conceptual questions. And for us to identify why they were conceptual questions, because we've done some clustering where we picked the top 10 tokens of each prompt. And when we looked at all these courses, I can speak of my course, for instance, the database systems, size, lock, join. These are all like main topic, main concepts, terminology that was used. So if students are using these terminologies, they're definitely querying, concepts. And we've asked several other questions. They're also seeking programming help for courses that has programming, and that comes almost the second for some of these courses. Of course, we also unfortunately notice a misuse of the tool to kind of someone places the homework assignment and seek help with it. I'll spend a minute to talk about the latest project, and I'd just like to emphasize something here, and I'll stop it right here. Most of the Gen AI tool that we have, even the UIUC chatbot or Illinois Chat as a new name, is kind of a document-based system. You upload the documents, and then you just leave it to the LLM to figure things out. As a database person who worked in genome sequencing and all these different types of projects, I don't feel comfortable letting a computer own like just the data and figure it out yourself. So I wanted to make sure that if I am using an LLM, I want to give it my domain expert. I want to give it the knowledge that I have, because I don't just look at the lecture notes as the lecture notes. For me, there's a graph where I capture the concepts, the precedence, connections between these concepts and all. So we want to go through the same concept here for the personalized learning system that we're building, where instructors upload course material. An LLM will generate a concept map. The instructor can actually tweak this concept map. In fact, the instructor will upload the syllabus so that we figure out the main concept of the course and the course material that they would like to map. We create what we call a RAG graph, right? So here, it's not just a bunch of documents there. There is a graph that captures the topics and relationships within the topics. And on the other side, as I mentioned, that the instructor would be able to edit this and refine it as we go. Once it's ready, the instructor say, here is my knowledge, LLM, use it. And that's when we can actually use a fine-tuned LLM for educational uses, where it's kind of more into guiding students and help them build their problem-thinking skills. And with the help of online assessment tools like Canvas or PraiRiLearn or any system that you're using, we should be able to track students' interaction across all the different assignments. Now think about this. You have a graph with the knowledge of the instructor, the expert knowledge. And then you have assessments that you're providing to students. If you're tagging these assessments with the topics that are in the graph, the LLM would be able to tell like how these topics are connected, and it is more power to kind of help students at a personal level, meaning that it knows now if a student is struggling in this particular question, maybe because they have not been able to kind of really understand the concept that was taught before. And the system will be able to do that because the system can generate new questions emphasizing that particular topic to just kind of confirm that the students is actually not well kind of prepared for that particular aspect. That with a dashboard and information for the instructor about the most common errors, the type of problems students struggle with, students who fell out of the network, that they're not getting a support, something I struggle with all the time when I am at the end of the semester trying to find the last attended date for a student who got an F, to figure out that he probably missed like half of the semester. And we don't have a lot of data points to be able to track them, but I feel like things like this are very important in this day and age. I'll stop right there because it's 2 p.m. By the way, I know that I kind of rushed things, so I do this because I am excited about it, carefully excited about it. And I would like, and I think this is a community effort that we need to work together. We need to be in workshops, we need to be in working groups. So if any of you are interested in exploring this, trying things with me, sharing their experience with what they've been doing in their classroom, I would be more than happy to spend time, because I think we're in an age that Gen AI forced us to do something that we haven't been able to do for a very long time, is to rethink about the things we teach and why we teach them, and be better at the way we do teaching and learning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Don't disconnect yet. Jamie, I sent you 2 links in Teams. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. Please, Jamie is going to post a couple of links in the chat, in the Zoom chat, One is for the Gen AI newsletter. If you're interested in what we offer at the here at the CATL, Gen AI related, please sign up for our Gen AI newsletter. And the second link is for the Fall into AI series calendar. So please avail yourself of other offerings. We have a full schedule of events running all the way until Thanksgiving, and we're hoping to secure at least 1 or 2 speakers for the weeks following the Thanksgiving break. And we will continue to offer Gen AI support and events in the spring semester as well. So we're not going anywhere, and the Fall into AI series is just getting started. As I mentioned before, this is the second event in the series, but as I said, the calendar lists all the upcoming events. So please go ahead and sign up for the newsletter and mark your calendar with the events that are coming up. We've got 2 lined up for next week. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Dr.
so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Abdu,
Yes,
it was fantastic presentation.
appreciate it.
I'm a soccer player too, and I don't need AI to tell me what's the best team. It's my team. If you're a fan, that's the way it is.
We'll fight over it.
Abdu, did you say early on that you were interested in citation?
Yeah, so part of my